Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart podcast network. I'm Jeremiah Shan. Joining me today is John Muller of Futi or Futi, or apparently however you want to say it.
Man, I'm on a podcast called Nos Audietes, and you're asking me how to pronounce footy?
No. I'm not making fun. I'm saying that it's clever because you can pronounce it whatever your language of choice is.
That's right. Yeah, it's international.
Exactly. No, our name. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, let alone what other people say. So I think yours is great. But anyway, welcome to the show, John.
Thanks. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So this is, in case people don't know, Futi. That's why I'm going with Futi because that's what sounds the most natural to me. What Futi is essentially a new type of stat site. I think is that a fair way of explaining it?
Yeah, so it's a mobile app that's like whatever you already use to check scores and stats, like FotMob, SofaScore. There are a million of those apps that all kind of look and feel the same. Ours is structured like that, but underneath the hood, it's powered by the kinds of models that team analytics departments use to understand how players play, how teams play, and hopefully give you a sort of deeper, tactical and data-based understanding of the game.
And so far, we've done a few stories already using some of the data that you guys have collected. What is your hope for this site? Is it something that is being used by teams? Is it something that sort of bridges the gap between what consumers or fans are using and what teams are using? Or is it something that you really hope is like a fan-focused, display?
Yeah, so the app is for everybody. Even though the data is more advanced than what people have access to currently, I think it speaks to questions that everybody has. And it really is just helping you to kind of answer soccer questions in a way that traditional soccer data is really not very good at doing. We've had kind of the same stats in soccer for a very long time. And knowing how many corner kicks a team took in a game doesn't tell you anything about how the game went or how they played, right? And to measure stuff that's really interesting in soccer, you actually have to have pretty sophisticated data. You have to have machine learning models built on every touch of the ball, and then you can simplify it down. And so that's what we're doing. Is we're building a live score app that anybody can use, and hopefully everybody will want to use because it uses those kind of more advanced tools to answer real questions.
So when you get into the guts, is this built on the same stuff that Opta is using, or is it using a different
Yeah, so we use different event data providers than Opta, but the same sort of thing. So it's data providers that clubs use, when they're scouting players, but provided live. So you can check it in game, and we'll be updating stats just like other apps do. And so it's built on data on every touch of the ball, sometimes called event data, sometimes called play-by-play data. It doesn't have data on all 22 players running around, what's called tracking data. That stuff it exists, but is way too expensive to run on this kind of app. So yeah, we're kind of the middle ground, right? We're not doing the space age stuff that clubs can afford to do when they're scouting because we have to do it live in a consumer app. But we're also not just like buying, basic stats that tell you this player completed 7 of 10 passes, because that doesn't really help. Right. Yeah.
So is there anything, when you started digging into this, you've obviously been covering soccer for a long time and writing about it on a pretty deep level for a long time. Was there anything that you sort of discovered or priors that you had that maybe got challenged by what your own app was telling you?
Oh man, all the time. And we're still, we're just now starting to introduce some of these models that we've been working on to the public, and we're still like kind of getting to really play around with them ourselves for the first time. And when the app goes live next month, when we start testing with users, like we're going to be finding out new stuff all the time. But yeah, so like when I wrote about soccer for The Athletic for years, and for other places like 538 and The Guardian, I very frequently had to like do all the data work myself, which was a lot, in part because I'm not a data scientist, right? I'm not even like, I've never taken a stats class in my life. I was a guy who like went to like liberal arts schools and like got a law degree, and literally just learned how to code and how to do soccer data stuff, because I was curious about how soccer worked. And I got involved with the American Soccer Analysis folks, and they taught me a lot. They've got real PhDs over there. So my co-founder at Footy is Mike Imbergio, who's a guy who worked at ASA. And he built like the Davies model, which was really successful for player recruitment, and like clubs started contacting him. He's been consulting and like building models for clubs that do this kind of stuff. And so like some of these models that we have in Footy are similar to things that you've already seen, like an American Soccer Analysis. They have this, goals added possession value model that some of your listeners have probably heard of. And when we rolled that out at ASA 6 years ago, like that changed a lot of how I think about soccer. Thinking about the game in terms of like goal probabilities at every moment already changed a lot of how I think about soccer. And so that's part of what we're doing at Footy. And that kind of revolution in how I see the game is just sort of ongoing for me. But what we're doing now is a lot of stylistic models that I haven't had access to before. And these are things that like I never could have built this, to write one article about it. It was something that like we needed. I needed a real serious data scientist who's worked with clubs, and we needed a lot of time and like money and to like build these things out. And so now I can measure things that I had never imagined being able to measure, like how teams play in specific phases of the game, like how, two players who play the same position have different roles, or within those roles, how there are completely different stylistic tendencies. It's really cool stuff, I think. And I'm still like kind of getting my head around it.
So, we've had a couple, like I said, we've had a couple articles that have dug into some of the data on here, specifically looking at the Sounders. And I am curious what you feel like what Footy is telling us about how the Sounders play. And, because I think one of the things that's interesting to me about the Sounders is that, Brian Schmetzer has now been the coach this is his 10th season, I believe. And, especially early on, one of the criticisms that was sometimes lobbed at them was, I don't really know what it is they're doing. Like they are playing they're winning games and it feels kind of sustainable, but they didn't have like a style. But what your information has shown us, I think, is that there is a style there. It just maybe doesn't fit into what we, like the broad brushes that oftentimes teams get painted with.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I will say like at a high level, what the Sounders are doing is kind of the new MLS meta, which is like they're fairly possession-y, right? They press a little bit, but not too much. Like they're not an extreme stylistic team, but they're playing good kind of fundamental soccer in a like standard formation. And so we have 4 primary team styles that we classify teams as playing during a match. And you could be like a launch and squish team, right? Who's playing really direct in possession and then like pressing high. And that's like kind of the Philadelphia Union, right? You could be a press and possess sort of classic, like Guardiola, like, suffocate the game in the opponent's end. Like the Crew did that. the Sounders were squarely in what we call control and regroup, right? They're controlling the ball in possession, but when they lose it, like they'll often fall back and not be like all out and sort of balls to the wall pressing. And that control and regroup quadrant that the Sounders are in is like most MLS teams have kind of migrated there in recent years. And so a lot of what they're doing is like, yeah, under Schmetzer, they've kind of always played this way. There have been subtle variations that we can see in the historical data, but like really it's been a story of the league kind of moving towards the Sounders. Now that said, like even in this like style that the whole league is playing, like we can see a lot of interesting stuff, and I am happy to dig into that with you. But
Yeah. Well,
our data is deep.
yeah, let's dig into that a little bit. What is it that you feel like like if you're gonna try to explain to someone how is it that the Sounders are, able to succeed on a level of not necessarily their heights. I think we understand their heights are oftentimes not quite as high as they've only won one supporter shield. It goes all the way, but you got to go back before Schmetzer to find that one. They've never even won the Western Conference in the regular season. I think they've only won it one other time, and that was in the COVID season. And so it's like they are oftentimes competitive, but they're not always the best. And I don't know, do you see anything in the data that sort of helps explain that?
So I guess on a sort of mid-tier stylistic level, like it's true that they are not extreme outliers on a lot of these metrics that we look at. Like they're a little bit more patient than most teams when they're progressing the ball. They're like fairly wide in the attack. I think Jake Burgess wrote about this for you guys. That's a pretty consistent characteristic of Schmetzer's teams is that, they'll attack from out wide and they'll use those cutback zones that a lot of people have written about over the years, to try to create high value chances.
The Man City zone is what a lot of people.
Man City zone, yeah. This was back when Man City used that zone. They don't anymore, but Sounders are doing it, which is good. But like, yeah, I mean, the way that they use their possession, I think, is pretty interesting to me. They were, I think, 7th in the league for possession last year. Like fairly high, but they were not a team that spent a lot of time in the buildup. So like San Diego, for example, I wrote an article for The Guardian last year using what we call phase of play data. And that means we've tagged every single action on the pitch with like what's going on contextually around it. Like what's the tactical situation, in this segment of the game. So like the buildup is when you're trying to play from your own third around your goal, trying to get it up towards the halfway line. And there are a lot of like, our data model is very sophisticated, and like there are a lot of triggers that can move you from one phase to another. It's not just about where the ball is, but basically that's it, right? San Diego would play a ton of passes in the buildup. They would play really deep, like short passes, and they would break really fast, right? The Sounders are kind of the opposite of that. They did not spend very much time at all in the buildup, and they spent a ton of time circulating patiently in what we call progression, which is, you're kind of in midfield. You're not quite close enough to put the ball in the box yet, but you're being very patient, trying to break the opponent down. And I think part of that is that the Sounders also weren't very good in the buildup. So they didn't spend a lot of time in it, but like they were kind of playing to their strengths. Jackson Reagan was really good, one of our top rated center backs, but Yeimar was not very good. He would get caught on the ball a lot. And that meant that their win rate of those buildup phases was not good, right? They weren't always progressing well. But once they got to progression, like the numbers are insane. They're really good at like taking the ball from midfield, creating chances. And that was one thing that they did extremely well in a way that like that balance was different than I think any other team in the league.
Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right, in the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newbern. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes. but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Hacks and Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Hacks and Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at hacksandferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDERATHEART, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to hacksandferments.com, use the code SOUNDERATHEART at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Hacks and Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Yeah, one of the other things that I thought was illustrated in Jake's story, for instance, was sort of this final third passing, where there was, they were, I believe, one of the top teams in terms of completing passes in the final third, and Albert Rusnak really stands out in that area for the Sounders.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a funny player because I think a lot of fans see him and they sort of they don't look at they don't see the consistency, they see the peaks, right? And this is a player who has, like the Sounders, consistently performed over I think he's now the longest tenured designated player in MLS history. And almost every season he's right around 10 goals, 10 assists. Come like one way or the other, he gets his numbers, but he's never putting up like MVP type numbers. But I feel like he sort of is an interesting player in this, at least, in that he's just consistently doing a lot of stuff that's dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that you mentioned a couple numbers that are kind of familiar and contrast in some ways with how footy measures players and teams. So like you were talking about, the Sounders have really high pass completion rates in the final third, right? And I think that goes back to that progression that we were talking about. Like if you have high completion rates in the final third, that means you're passing backwards a lot, right? You're circulating, you're kind of being patient. You're not all in the box directly, right? And very frequently, like, because pass completion rates have kind of been like one of the few stats that we've had access to, we focused on that and we thought like, oh, high pass completion rates are better or whatever. Like, that's not always true. It can be, like, stylistically it can be, but it is really more of a measure of style. And so what we use is something called possession value, which again is similar to goals added. It's a measure of goal probabilities, all like every single touch. And so what we would ask is not like, okay, if Rusnak has the ball in the final third, not does he complete the next pass, but does the next pass help his team to get into a better goal scoring situation, right? So, whether that's a safe, complete pass backwards or, a really aggressive, like, dribble into the box or something, like, those goal probabilities are how we evaluate players. And so, yeah, like Rusnak shows up really well in that. Although we're dealing with something interesting right now where the way that our player ratings work, it's sometimes difficult to compare like an attacking midfielder and like a second striker, a guy who might play in a similar area. And you have to have different baselines for the goal probability. So we're still like, we're messing around with these models even as we speak, even as we like get ready to roll this thing out for users. And as we re-baseline these guys, I think Rusnak is one of the top 5 attacking mids in the league, which most people would probably agree with. Like he's a really good player, but we're not measuring that on the basis of goals and assists, because assists can be anything, right? It could be like a little like 2-yard pass to somebody who then dribbles through the whole opponent.
Or like in the first game of the season, Jesus Ferreira, of course, it was a secondary assist, but he gets a secondary assist for that pass that Rothrock has to save from going out of bounds, just because it's like ends up being, I guess it pushed the Sounders into the attacking third or so. I don't exactly know the reasoning for it, but that was kind of a funny assist where it was like basically a horrible pass, but it worked out okay. And that's oftentimes what assists, like, I don't know, assists are funny like that, but we don't need to delve into that. Would you say that aside from, this is a genuine question, I don't know if the answer to, which I guess is sometimes a bad strategy, but I'll ask it anyway. As a lawyer, I'm sure you can appreciate that. But are you getting into defining player roles as well as sort of or player styles as opposed to just team styles?
Yeah. So we're going to drop a whole series on this next week.
Whew. A lot
Yeah.
of sweat there.
Thanks for setting me up for that. So this series is going to talk about a bunch of the player models that we have, and the first thing is roles as distinct from positions, right? So a lot of times, where you line up on the lineup card isn't where you actually wind up playing, and so if you're using those positions on the lineup sheet as sort of your baseline for judging a player, you might wind up comparing them to totally the wrong group of players, right? So the first thing we do is we create data-based roles to figure out where the player is really playing. Then within those roles, we have what we call player styles. And so that is where we get into okay, so you're in the sort of defensive midfield group, right? But are you, sort of a regista who's pinging these long passes, right? A deep lying playmaker type, or are you like a destroyer, right? A totally different type of player. And so we can use a lot of kind of sophisticated modeling to tell you not just where does a player play, but what type of player are they, right? And we've got a bunch of these different player styles. Then we've got player tendencies, which is distinct from styles, but it's telling you sort of when they are in certain situations, how do they like to play? Like, where do they like to be more aggressive, or where do they like to drop outside the block versus trying to receive inside the lines, or where do they like to dribble on the ball rather than, trying to pass? Like that kind of tendency helps us to get an even deeper layer of understanding of how the player plays. Finally, on top of all that, we can layer in stuff like the goal probabilities that we talked about in the possession value model, and also something called RAPM, which basketball fans probably know, which is like kind of when you're on the pitch versus when you're off, how well is your team playing? That's a really difficult thing to do in soccer. You need a lot of minutes because players don't come on and off the pitch as much as in basketball. And you need pretty sophisticated modeling techniques, but it can give us some signal on all the like intangible stuff that players do, all the off-ball stuff that they're doing that you can't measure directly with the data. All of that goes into our player rating. And so in the end, we get a number that looks just like any other live score apps, like, a 1 to 100 rating for the player, but it's so much more sophisticated and it's telling you so much more about their performance.
I know, and I know we, especially Americans, love that definitive number that tells us how good a player is. How close are you to rolling that out?
So you're going to see some player ratings next week from us at Futi. Those are going to be, right now we're just releasing 2025 data. In about, a little over a month now, we're going to start testing with users, maybe even less than a month, depending on how excited we get to start giving some early invites. And so then those folks will have access to live data from 2026, and we'll, get that widespread as fast as we can. But yeah, by next week, you'll be able to see all this like player role data that I'm talking about, the player tendencies, the player ratings, up to the end of last season. And you can see, how some of this stuff evolved over time.
And so are you like, what are you ultimately, what is the end game for all this? Is this, is there like I don't know, what's like, how do you want to, what do you foresee Footy being in a couple years when it's sort of like matured?
So the end game for me is honestly just to like help people enjoy soccer more. Like, really, like it sounds stupid. Like it's not a very like world conquering, CEO founder slogan, but like genuinely, I just want.
I can appreciate it.
Like our current slogan at Footy that we decided on recently is "See the whole game." Right, the whole old like Busquets thing. Like you watch Busquets, you see the whole game. Like that's what our data is supposed to help you do. And we want to build a really good live score app, and then we want to go even deeper than that. And we want to give like, fans who want, hardcore stuff for whatever reason. A lot of people are just sickos, we want to give you deeper data on the things that you like. We want to build fantasy games around it. Right. Eventually we may have a club facing product as well, because a lot of the models that we're building, like one problem, sorry, my dog's barking. One problem in, soccer, like real life soccer clubs, is that every soccer club spends a ton of time and money kind of building the same models and the same software that we're building right now. And like soccer teams shouldn't really be software companies. Like that's kind of inefficient, right? Like they all think that they're going to get this unique edge over other clubs, but really it's more about how you use the data. And so we think that if we have these baseline models, like we can, put that stuff out for clubs and hopefully free up club data people to work on more advanced stuff.
Yeah. I know that is one of the things I always wonder about with this data, and I think that the Sounders at least seem to be doing a good job of illustrating that. You can have all this data, and the Sounders seem like they appreciate the data, and they put a lot of time and energy into it. But there's also this sort of like element of recruitment that I think maybe they have gotten better than a lot of other teams, which is it's not just what the numbers are telling you a player is doing. It's not even just what your eyes are telling you that the player is doing. It's like, how does that player fit into whole the whole piece? Like, how does that piece fit into the larger puzzle? And that does seem to be one area where, the data probably is never going to be able to tell us. And I guess that's a good thing, right? Like, we want a human element to ultimately just like the data should refine stuff, and it should inform us and help us understand things. But ultimately, I think we all want humans to be, making the decisions to like, we don't want AI to build our teams, I guess is what I'm saying.
I guess that depends on who you ask.
Yeah, I guess it does. It does. I think as fans,
here's what I'll say. Like, data, even at really good soccer teams, is almost never the last word. Like, it's
right.
There are only a handful of like weirdo clubs that are trying to do all of their recruitment with data. And some do, and some actually do it successfully. But to do that, you need really sophisticated models, not just for the types of stylistic stuff that I was talking to you about, although that is important if you're going to assess, not just is this player good, but are they the right fit for this squad, right? So the right tactical fit, you need a lot of stylistic stuff. You might need some, measures of chemistry, right? You might need kind of projecting like depth charts. There's a lot that you can do with data to build a good team, but at the end of the day, like, what it's really good for is helping you to scout all of these players that you can't watch on video, right? There are like 10,000 players in the world who could be good MLS players, and nobody's going to watch all those guys, right? You have to find who are the people who you actually want to go, like, grind some tape on. And then after you grind the tape, like, and this is where I think the human element really comes in. Teams, will send live scouts, and frequently the live scouts job is not so much to like tell you the same stuff that you could see on video, but to go talk to coaches, talk to teammates, maybe even talk to like people in the stands and like watch the players like body language and like watch how they interact with people. You're trying to get a sense of like, is this a good personal fit for our team, right? You want to get a read on the person. And I think that's where the human element is always going to exist in soccer, because teams are teams of people, not just data points.
Right. One of the recent anecdotes that I got from a guy who does scouting for the Sounders was he was talking about going to Spain to watch the third division, not because they were actively recruiting out of the third division of Spain, but they wanted that sort of visual data to tell them like, what's the level that these players are actually at? And if we're getting data if someone's sending us tape or they're sending us data points or whatever, and we're looking on a spreadsheet, even on film, what is this player doing? And it's like, wow, he's dominating these guys. But if you don't have any context for who he's doing it against, it doesn't ring the same. And I just thought that was kind of an interesting piece, that it was like understanding the full context of everything is still important.
I mean, if I was getting paid to hang out in Spain, I'd say the same thing. Like, this is
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I gotta be on the beach, in Barcelona right now. No, like I think that there is something to that. Although a lot of league adjustment stuff is things that you do with data, and like it's hard, but it is like kind of one of the fundamental things that clubs try to do. There's also like a lot of like atmosphere stuff though, right? Like I've talked to South American scouts who are like, yeah, you're never going to see in the data or on Y-Scout that this game was played in La Paz at like 8,000 feet, right? And like,
right.
What that does to you physically, like, is very dramatic. And yeah, sure, fans, atmosphere, all these things. Like, did they fly in late last night and like get no sleep and then play this game? Like, these are things that are not easy to suss out from Y-Scout.
Although I'm guessing the data would probably tell you that getting some sleep before the game, like, you'll probably be able to find enough examples of both that you can get some data on that too, right?
You know what? If that data set exists, we haven't found it yet. There's probably some sleep data for like whole leagues out there.
That's the next variable to plug into the system. But John,
data.
Yeah. Well, John, where can people read you? Where can they go check this out? What's the timeline for everything? Like, set up our readers, for our listeners, for using this in their real lives?
Cool. So the first place that you probably want to go is Futi.live, Futi.live. That's our website. You can, read a little bit more about the app, and you can also join the wait list. So if this is something that you want to use when the app is something you can actually download on your phone, like go do that, go join the wait list. But if you want to hear more about like the nuts and bolts behind it and understand some of these models that we've been talking about, go to our Substack. You can just Google Footy Substack, or you can go to footyapp.substack.com. So that's where we're going to publish these explainers that I'm talking about regarding all the player style stuff. That'll be coming out next week. And then, of course, you can follow us on all the social media sites. I am currently cutting some short form video for the first time in my life, which I hate, but a lot of people like that's how people engage with things these days. So like, yeah, we're going to do some video explainers. We're going to be, posting on Blue Sky and whatever. We've got a great Discord channel as well. If you want to come hop in and talk with soccer analytics nerds, you can join us over there.
And I got to tell you, it warms the cackles of my heart that among the social media channels that you guys are not advertising of being on, I don't see Twitter on here.
I blew up my 50,000 follower Twitter account and never looked back. And yeah, don't miss it at all. Blue Sky's great. It's got a good.
Yeah. Hey, it is funny, not to get too far afield, but it was very funny because someone did this map of Blue Sky users and sort of like tried to define like what circles people were in. And there's an American soccer circle, and then there's a Sounders circle, which was separate. And at first people were like, oh, Sounders fans are so weird. They have their own separate thing. And I said, actually, I think what's going on here is that there's enough Sounders people. It's the only American team with enough people on Blue Sky where we could have our own. And I know, I just love it. I love it. I love that I can exist in a Sounders echo chamber. It's great. But John, thank you so much for doing this. Where can they follow you on Blue Sky as well?
So I'm at johnspacemuller.com is my Blue Sky handle, I think. But yeah, come check out Footy.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, good talking to you, John. I'm now waiting with bated breath to be able to get access to this app. I actually learned in this interview that it was Footy.live that I'd been missing, and not because I'd just been going to your Substack looking for stuff. But
yeah, for a long time we were only pointing people to the Substack, but now we've got a live wait list, so we're telling people to sign up.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, well, with that, we're going to get out of here. I'm Jeremiah Oshan. This is No Study Yet Dis, part of the Sounder Heart Podcast Network, and we will catch you next time.
Let's go Sounders. Yeah.